The youngest of these children was just 6 years old. Few words can adequately convey our sadness and our pain as a nation. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families as they go through the pain and the anguish of losing their children. Losing a child is something that no parent should ever have to go through and endure. The young children who died were not just the children of their families, they were our nation's children. Our people have every right to be upset and to be angry in the face of such tragedies. At a time like this, we need to unite as a country and work together to end these deaths. We must do what it takes to make sure that such tragedies never happen again. As soon as the deaths occurred, multidisciplinary teams in government were activated to address these incidents. These teams included police, health officials, environmental inspectors, Department of Agriculture officials, and officials from the National Consumer Commission. Cabinet has met on 3 occasions to receive reports from these departments on the recent incidents. This is what we now know. The National Institute of Communicable Diseases was requested to conduct scientific tests and established that the deaths of the 6 children in Naledi, Soweto, can be directly attributed to a highly hazardous chemical used as a pesticide known as Turbophos. Turbophos can have serious health effects, even at low levels of exposure. Turbophos is an organophosphate chemical that is registered in our country for agricultural use. It is not allowed to be sold for general household use. However, this chemical is being informally sold as a so-called street pesticide for domestic use in townships, in informal settlements, to control rats and rodents. Samples were taken from 84 spaza shops in Naledi. Of these, 3 had evidence of Turbophos, this chemical. After stringent testing, a chip packet found on one of the children who had died had traces of Turbophos on both the inside and the outside of the packet. As part of the investigation into the deaths that occurred in Naledi, inspectors confiscated a number of illegal pesticides from spaza shops. They found instances where food was being stored alongside pesticides and detergents. It was also found that these spaza shops lacked proper safe food storage, hand and dishwashing facilities, increasing the likelihood of food contamination. Even as our investigations are ongoing, it is critical to understand that this is not a problem that is confined to spaza shops and other informal traders. It seems to be widespread. The unregulated use of restricted pesticides in communities has become a growing problem with devastating consequences. In many townships, another chemical, aldicarb, and an organophosphate known as galliperini are commonly sold by street vendors and hawkers to control rat infestations. Aldicarb has been banned for use in South Africa since 2016. Last year, 3 children in Ekurhuleni and 3 children in Soweto died after exposure to aldicarb. In responding to these tragedies, we need to understand the cause of this challenge in our communities. One of the reasons that people use pesticides for is to deal with rat infestation or prevalence. The problem of rat prevalence or infestation is due in part to poor waste management in several areas where our people live. Rubbish is not collected regularly, streets are not cleaned as they should be, creating conditions for rats and other pests to thrive. Often the poorest communities are the worst affected, and often the cheapest remedies that are used are these highly hazardous substances like Tebufos and aldicarb. Another challenge is that responsibility for environmental health that should happen in our communities is the responsibility of local government. Many municipalities do not have the capacity and resources to conduct inspections of these businesses and enforce regulations. Our response must therefore address all these factors that contribute to the problem. We also need to prevent the spread of misinformation which has been prevalent. The investigations that have taken place do not suggest any deliberate campaign to poison children in our country. There is also no evidence that the problem is confined to spaza shops that are owned by foreign nationals only. These products are just as likely to be sold in shops that are also owned by South Africans. We all have a duty as the state, as a society, as parents and families to protect those amongst us who are most vulnerable, and these are our children. Following the special meeting of Cabinet, we have decided to make the following interventions. The first intervention is to get hazardous pesticides off our streets and our shelves. The second critical intervention is to protect children from exposure to these substances. The third critical intervention is to prevent future outbreaks. The following measures will be implemented with immediate effect. To get hazardous pesticides off the street, we now have directed that the spaza shops, which have been implicated in the deaths of children, must be closed with immediate effect. All spaza shops and other food handling facilities must be registered within municipalities in which they operate within 21 days from today. Any shop that is not registered within 21 days and does not meet all health standards and requirements will be closed. The South African Police Service and other law enforcement agencies will be required to investigate, to arrest, and to prosecute offenders. This will involve close cooperation with all registered manufacturers, retailers, and suppliers. Integrated multidisciplinary inspection teams will undertake compliance inspections of food handling facilities, manufacturers, distributors, wholesale and retailers. This will include spaza shops, as well as general dealers. Non-compliant businesses and shops linked to any poisoning incidents or found to unlawfully stock hazardous chemicals will be shut down and the law will take its course. A massive campaign of door-to-door inspection of all spaza shops, tuck shops and other informal traders will be undertaken, starting with Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. This will be undertaken by interdisciplinary inspections teams consisting of the South African Military Health Services, which did very well during COVID, environmental health practitioners, the South African Police Service, the National Council of Consumers, labor inspectors, and others. The initial phase of inspections will need to be completed within a month. All registered manufacturers of tuberforce will be inspected, that is their premises, to ensure that no products are diverted into non-agricultural markets. The supply chain process for distribution and sale of tuberforce will be investigated to ensure that controls are being adhered to and that there is accountability for who they sell to in the agricultural sector. Regulations and protocols on the traceability, repackaging and distribution and sale of pesticides, insecticides and foodstuffs will be strengthened. The second intervention is about the protection of children from exposure to harmful substances. The Department of Basic Education will immediately issue a circular to provincial education departments and all schools on best practice protocols for preventing and managing foodborne illnesses within schools. By the start of the new school year, the Department of Basic Education and school governing bodies, together with the Department of Health, will review and update the guidelines for schools on the management of suppliers of foodstuffs to all schools. This will include tuck shops operated at these schools and indeed everyone who sells food just outside the school premises. A public education campaign will be launched aimed at children, parents, caregivers, and the broader community on the food safety issues and the identification, the handling, and storage of dangerous chemicals. This campaign will also include the Government Communication Information Service. It will include government departments and agencies. We will also get industry organizations and civil society formations to also participate in this. And this will be complemented by a public education campaign aimed at communities, owners of shops, informal traders, and other retailers on health, safety, and hygiene regulations, and the identification of hazardous products and regulations that apply to hazardous products and the legal consequences if these are not adhered to. Ministers of Basic Education and Health and other government departments will classify certain pesticides and insecticides not suitable for home use or dangerous objects that may not be brought or used on school premises. This will be undertaken in terms of the regulations and safety measures for public schools. The third intervention will be aimed at preventing future outbreaks. I have directed that the joint operational and intelligence structures be established at national and provincial level to deal with this crisis. In dealing with this crisis, our local municipalities will be required to take urgent action to address the problem of rat infestations by cleaning cities and towns and removing waste. All municipal landfills, sites will be required to comply with the National Environmental Management Waste Act, and failure to comply will result in strict sanctions that include directives, compliance notices, and yes, enforcement measures. Now, a ministerial health advisory committee is being set up to develop medium and long-term prevention measures. This committee will consist of experts such as toxicologists, pediatricians, chemical pathologists, epidemiologists, forensic pathologists, and others. All deaths of patients who are 12 years and below will now be made notifiable in terms of the notifiable medical condition surveillance system. An electronic medical certification of death will be established to allow the National Department of Health to access cause of death information immediately after a death is certified. The work of the Biosecurity Hub will be strengthened to better control the entry of products, organisms, and harmful biological products at ports of entry. The Department of Agriculture is in the process of reviewing and updating all relevant legislation with respect to the regulation and authorization of agricultural pesticides for use in our country. A joint fund of 500 million rand will be established by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and Small Business Development to support township and rural businesses, including community convenience stores. The funding will be for the refurbishment of businesses and non-financial support in terms of technical skills, regulatory compliance, and capacity building. As we undertake these interventions and measures, there is a lot that we can do as parents to protect our children. As consumers and parents, if we buy food or send our children to buy food, it must only be from places that are licensed to sell foodstuffs and that observe food safety regulations. We must make it a habit to check that food is prepared in a clean and hygienic area. We must make sure that foodstuffs being sold have a clear branding and labels. The names of the manufacturers must be clearly depicted, and that they do not have expiry dates that have long passed. We must educate our children about food safety and teach them to check for this labeling themselves. Anyone who sees fake foodstuffs and expired foodstuffs being sold in our communities should report them to the National Consumer Commission. The number for the National Consumer Commission is 012 065 1940. 012 065 1940. We have to take greater care with the storage and the utilization of pesticides and dangerous chemicals, as not doing so has dire consequences. We must only buy pesticides that are in their original containers and that are clearly labeled for household use. All dangerous chemicals must be kept out of reach of children. Spaza shops and street vendors have a special responsibility for the health and safety of their customers. They need to operate responsibly and in terms of our laws. They need to observe certain basic practices about food safety. For example, they must not use the same containers or implements for chemical substances and food. Only pesticides and chemicals registered for household use may be sold. They must be clearly labeled and in their original packaging. Establishments found to be in possession of pesticides that are restricted or banned will face legal consequences. Once again, South Africans are called to work together to overcome this great difficulty that has befallen us. We are far from being helpless, and there is much that we can do when we work together. Each one of us needs to be better informed about the risk of pesticides and other dangerous products. And we need to be informed about the safety of the food that we consume. Each of us needs to take responsibility for the safety and well-being of those around us, particularly the children of our nation. And I do believe that by working together, by enforcing the law, by being alert and responsible, we'll be able to bring an end to these tragedies. Once again, we extend our condolences to the families of the children who have passed away, and hope that the Almighty God will give them strength to go through this very difficult period that they are going through. Morena boloka setjhaba sa heso, Modimo va patutshedze Afrika Tshipembe, Morena o boloke setjhaba sa heso, Nkosi sikelele Africa, God seën South Africa, and God bless South Africa and all of us. I thank you.